Are silver and gold a way to protest the current system and, in fact, to get out of the current financial system? Well, this is what we're going to look at in just a moment in today's video. Today is Friday, March the 6th, 2026. It's about 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. We've got about 2 hours to go before the market closes down for the weekend. I always kind of look forward to the weekends coming because you can kind of clear your head of all the noise that's going on. You don't have the actual activity of the market going on, which sometimes will prompt us to make decisions in the moment that we wouldn't normally make if we were just sitting back and planning those decisions in a quiet time without any pressure. And so I do like the weekends. We're just about to get into it. Right now, silver is trading at about $84.40. That's about $2.30 above where it opened this morning. Didn't do a video yesterday, so let me just kind of bring you up to date. Yesterday, we had a fairly decent sized price range. We traded as low as $78.71 and as high as $85.69. And we were down for the day, about $1 was all. So very light volume day yesterday, and the day before was an extremely light volume day as well. As a matter of fact, Wednesday and Thursday were the lightest volume days on the futures contracts on the COMEX during the last 2 or 3 months. And today appears to be another pretty light volume day. It does seem like things are starting to settle down on the COMEX, and part of that may have to do with what they pulled a few days ago, just as the March contract was about to expire and the first notice day was coming up, and they actually closed the market down for an hour and a half for some kind of a technical malfunction. And then when it opened back up, all of a sudden the market reversed and people had been able to get out of their short positions for the upcoming delivery, and it just worked out perfect for them, or so they thought. But again, because of all the different things that are going on right now within some of the Western markets, the London market, the LBMA, and the New York market, the COMEX, there's been a number of players, pretty significant players, that are ceasing to use them as their main source of pricing. India mentioned just about a week ago that they were no longer going to be relying on the Western markets for their pricing, and so they're not the only ones. And then we've seen some different conflicts come up in the last month that would indicate that there seems to be a resistance by the Western nations to go along with the BRICS agreements that have been coming up. And it does seem like that some of these conflicts, shall we say, are aimed directly at trying to prevent the BRICS from being able to exchange their products in their own local currencies. And so there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that the world is getting tired of, and because of that, I think we're starting to see it in the various markets, and the COMEX is one of those markets. Again, the volume just keeps going down on that. It's not to insinuate that it will remain down. There will come a time, if the COMEX and the LBMA start to really lose their grip, that there will be a tremendous amount of volume on those exchanges when things come unwound. And so I'd keep my eye on these exchanges. I'd just kind of listen to what is going on in the news. I wouldn't get carried away with one analyst here or one analyst there, because everyone has their own different take on it. It's sufficient to know that the world is a very unsettled place right now, and the world is a heavily indebted place right now. Sovereignties owe more money now to central banks than they ever have before. Individuals also are at record debt levels. And so there are so many things that are going on right now that it should cause you to kind of step back and think, what will happen if the system that we're under right now comes unwound? And maybe there's something that would be worth your consideration. I'll explain it in just a moment. I do want to point out that we dropped this support line. The support line had been at $84.52. It was a very temporary support line. It hadn't been in place long, and then sure enough, this last Tuesday we breached that, went all the way down to 77.87, and we have closed below that 84.52 mark for 4 days, or for 3 days running. Right now we're right about that mark. So drop the support line to 77.87. That seems to be holding for right now. And of course, the firm support line of $70 is one that we all are interested in, because if it ever drops below that significantly and stays below that, well, we could have a change in the market, at least for a period of time. I think this is just a natural correction. In a bull market, sometimes you'll see a 50% correction in the middle of a bull market, and we certainly had a big correction from $122 an ounce at one point, and we've been down as far as $64 an ounce in the last month. And so we've had a tremendous correction. But again, the prices seem to be stabilizing, even though there's always the market participants that will try and push it in one direction or another. But right now, we're at about $84.40, as I say, with about 2 hours left to go in this week's trading. So let's keep an eye on all this. It's kind of a helpful thing to be able to look at a range and to see whether or not we continue to trade in it or not. And again, once we broke that 84.50 level and stayed below it, you could say that that's no longer support, obviously no longer support, but we are creeping back up to that old line. So that's the market for today. I wanted to get back to this idea of what happens when people lose confidence in the system. And it's a pretty serious thing when that happens. I've mentioned before, my background is in real estate appraising. I began right out of college working for my dad as a real estate appraiser. He had been a real estate appraiser since 1960. And so he was very much aware of the real estate market. He was hired by some pretty big companies. He was a real estate correspondent for Metropolitan Life. And when I was a boy, we would move from bust town to boom town, where they would send him to invest in different types of real estate. Metropolitan Life obviously made its money off of life insurance policy premiums. But when they got that money, they didn't just put it in government bonds or T-bills. They would invest in real estate with the hopes of being able to have a decent return, so that when their policy holders did die, they had the money to take care of that. And so that's what he did for years and years. He was a commercial real estate appraiser, went all over the country and even up into Canada at different times. And so that was his background, and he was the one who trained me in residential real estate appraising. And so that was our background. The reason I mention that is because even though I became a preacher in 1995, and my dad retired from real estate appraising, probably about the year 2000, we both watched the market pretty carefully. And as the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006 were rolling along, we both were noticing all these commercials that were on television advertising loans for people. As a matter of fact, they were no documentation loans. All you had to do is fill out an application, and based on that application, they would lend you money on a house. And then they started taking these instruments and they started chopping them up into 1,000 different pieces, and they would put them in different financial instruments that they would then sell to the market. It was a very complex situation. It was also a very risky situation. And my dad and I used to laugh about that when we would get together and talk about, this is going to end badly. And sure enough, about 2007, the real estate market started wobbling a little bit, and by 2008 it had been nationally in a full-blown collapse. And these collateralized mortgages that they had been chopping up into all these risky instruments started coming unwound to the point where it brought down some pretty big players. You might remember Bear Stearns and some of the other ones. And it also vaulted a number of the banks into supremacy. Remember that the banks are the same people who own stock in the Federal Reserve, in the central banks. And they have quite a pull with our government officials, our Secretary of Treasury and things like that. And so in 2008, America and different parts of the world really did have kind of a financial restructuring, and some of the banks that had been doing pretty good all of a sudden came into extreme power, and some of their competition was removed from them. And so, but all this happened because the banks were allowed to get involved with shaky financial instruments, and then rating agencies would come in and give them high ratings as if they were AAA, only to find out later on that these collateralized mortgages were little more than junk. If you knew what you were looking at, I was just a real estate appraiser for 13 years. I appraised about 2,000 houses. My dad had been a real estate appraiser all of his life, a lot more wisdom than I had, but we could just look at it and see this was going to be a problem. It was common sense. Well, I believe that's the way the common American is right now. As a matter of fact, the common citizen of whatever nation they're in right now has to be looking at the financial situation and our increasing problem with debt to the point where it's very clear that we can never pay that debt off. At some point, it's going to have to default. And we're going to need some pretty strong leaders during that time. I'm not talking about leaders that are maniacal and leaders that are power hungry, but we've got to be careful, because that's very likely the very type of a person that we will turn to when we're in financial trouble and our nation is. So we see all this going on right now, and we're concerned about what might happen, very much like the financial crisis coming into 2007 and 2008. You can see this as a problem that is unfolding right now. And so what are we going to do? What are our options? I was listening to a video today, an excellent video, by the way. It was by Danielle Camboni of ITM Trading. She used to be the main interviewer for Kitco for years and years, and now she's associated with ITM. And she was interviewing a gentleman by the name of Chris Whalen. And Chris Whalen is the chairman of the Whalen Global Advisors. He's an investment banker and has a lot of knowledge when it comes to private credit and things like that, but also a lot of knowledge when it comes to precious metals. And one of the comments he made really kind of stood out to me. He said that precious metals, in essence, were an act of refusal by part of the public to continue to go along with what's going on right now. In other words, there comes a point in any financial system where you can see this is just not right. It's not going to end well. And if I remain in this financial system, if I remain unprotected from what's going on by our leaders and by our banks and big insurance companies, well, my family is going to suffer as a result of that. And so there comes a point, and many of us in this community have reached this point, where we look at the financial circumstances of the world and of our nation, and we realize this is going to end badly. And so we start investing in precious metals, and it very much is what Mr. Whalen was talking about. It's an act of refusal. We're not going to participate in this system in the same way any longer. And by that, I don't mean that we're all going to sell our properties and move out into the country and become survivalists. I don't mean that at all. We're still going to have our jobs. We're still going to get paid in fiat currency, paper money, that has no backing other than the full faith and credit of our government. We're going to still buy groceries. We're still going to buy houses. We're still going to buy gasoline and cars and everything else like that. But we're also going to try and at least take a portion of what we have and set it aside to protect ourselves. we're going to refuse to participate in this system in the same way that everybody else is, where they're just blindly going into an abyss of debt. And so this is what precious metals offers for you, whether we're talking about silver or gold or platinum or whatever your favorite precious metal is. Mine obviously, or my background is obviously in silver, and that's why I talk about it. But we buy these things in order to put aside part of our wealth, store part of our wealth into an asset that's not under anybody else's control. I'm always hearing things like, well, the government can confiscate it at any minute. It can get stolen, on and on and on. And of course, these things are true. It's not a perfect situation. But what we're trying to do is have the most perfect situation that we can for ourselves and for our family. And so we take a portion of our income and we convert it to precious metals. And by doing so, we've now set it into something that that has historically held its value and sometimes outperformed every other investment class. We've seen that in the last year in silver and gold. And so we know that there are times where it does very well, but we're really buying it more for an insurance policy. And in a lot of ways, it is to an extent what Mr. Whalen was talking about. It's an act of refusal. It's a very conscious decision to get out of the system and protect part of our wealth, because we're concerned that at some point, if this system does break down, that there's going to be chaos. And then what will happen to us? What will happen to our families? What will happen to friends and relatives that we care about, that we're concerned about? And so we take certain precautions, not just in putting aside things in precious metals, but many of us also have what I like to refer to as a strategic pantry, where we have several months worth of food in store. Nothing fancy. It can be something as simple as beans and rice and the things that go along with that will give you calories, that will give you protein and carbohydrates to get through a situation. And then we stock up on other things that we know we'll need, paper goods and things for our automobiles and just things that we use around the house. And so we start having a little bit more of a strategic outlook on our lives. Dave Ramsey talks about the typical Southerner in the way he handles money is just somebody who diddy-bops along through life. He doesn't really give it a lot of thought. He just lives. He buys what he wants and he lives how he wants. He's surprised when he gets into debt and can't continue to buy what he wants and gets what he wants. He's just a diddy-bopper. Well, we try to make sure that we have some rationale behind what we do. Now, I'm a Christian. I'm absolutely convinced that this life is just a brief preview of what heaven will be like if we can be faithful. And I don't mean the bad parts of this world. I mean the good parts of this world. And I believe that we're all servants of God. We are stewards of the resources He entrusts us with. We're not to use them just to be greedy and stock up for selfish purposes, but we do take some thought to the care of ourselves in the future, but also some thought to the care of others. And so these are all things that go into this idea of, I'm concerned about where we're at right now. I'm concerned about the morals of our world. I'm concerned about the debt in our world, about the corruption in places of power. And so I'm going to do my best to do something that will be productive in life. And so we start making preemptive moves to be able to help other people, ourselves and other people. And this very much is an act of refusal to just participate, to just diddy-bop through life. But by doing so, it helps us to focus, I think, a little bit better on things that are important. Again, I believe we need to be focusing on the spiritual first, but I also realize that God has set us in a physical world, and He expects us to make physical provisions as well, not just for ourselves, but so that we can help take care of others. And so all this goes into this idea, this mentality that is different than the vast majority of the population. It is very much an attitude of I don't like the system, and I'm going to get out of the system as much as I can, so if the system does collapse, that I can help other people. And so this is why I believe we need to be focused on things like this. The silver market, the silver prices, the day-to-day fluctuations, they're interesting. They can be aggravating, but they're things that we can follow and do follow. But don't lose sight of the big picture on this, why you are doing this in the first place. And if you are doing it as an insurance policy to be prepared for the future so that not only can you take care of yourself but others, then continue to do this. Just in the last week, I've been finding good deals on 90%. A lot of people are getting out of 90%. I look at that as an opportunity. So I bought about $18 face of 90% at about 45 times face. That's about $20 below spot right now. I've bought 9 silver dollars for about $55 each. And so that's about $15 or $20 below the price of silver right now. And so if you look around, you can find some good deals. You can put aside some of your money and you can get that part of your wealth outside of the system into a form that hopefully will store its value and hopefully help not only you but others in the future. Well, that's the video for today. I just thought maybe as we're entering the weekend, this would give you something to think about. We've got so many distractions right now, so many news items that are just bombarding us. Sometimes it's good to remember what we're here for and what we're doing, and in a calmer moment to make some rational plans so that maybe we can not just survive this life, but we can thrive through it and help others to do the same. That's the video for today. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. I always appreciate your comments. Appreciate those of you who have subscribed very much, and I thank all of you for watching to this point. I hope we'll see you again next time. God bless.